Welcome to Picayune Conversations. I'm Calvin.
I'm Lindsay.
And today we are continuing this series, although I'm aware we keep taking these breaks in the middle of our series, but we have this series on emotions that we've been doing. And this time we're talking about shame, which I know is like, don't you feel like this is like the emotion that constantly gets talked about in therapist circles? And
yes. It's almost like a new buzzword.
Yeah.
Kind of like narcissist, you know?
Yeah, it's like shame behind every door, you know? There's like...
and that it's somehow really bad. Like really bad.
Yeah, sometimes I've even talked about it sometimes with people as though sometimes I listen to how mental health professionals talk about shame, and it's like this is like the one taboo emotion. That, you know, it's like everything else is on the table, but we should never feel shame. Ever, and I'm being hyperbolic, but
it points to how we want to just push it away and excommunicate it instead of seeing the real purpose of it and maybe making use of it. Like maybe it's pointing to something valuable.
Yeah,
it is.
Well,
spoiler.
Yeah, so let's talk about let's think about shame. As with all of these episodes that we've been doing on emotions, we kind of start by talking about what is the adaptive purpose of this? Why is it that this is an emotion that we have the capacity to feel? What's its function?
Yeah, and Paul, he named it the unacceptability emotion, but as you and I were talking, what did we say? The hiding emotion?
Yeah.
But that, maybe you guys can help us with this, but it is hiding, but it's like self-protection from, isolation or social rejection.
Social rejection, yeah.
Yeah, it's like hiding from that. But it's really self-protective, which is kind of a fear thing. But all the emotions are related anyway. So if it feels like that, you're on the right track.
Yeah, it's just, of course, we already did this episode on guilt. And so if you haven't listened to that, you should go back and listen to it. But, guilt says, I have done something wrong. And shame says, I am something wrong. Or maybe not all of it, but there is something wrong about me that I cannot change. And that is fundamentally worthy of rejection.
Yeah, if somebody finds out, surely I'll be rejected. They will not accept this about me.
Yeah. And here's what's hard about that. I just kind of want to put this on the table, and I would love to get your thoughts on this. But, sometimes we think of, rejection. It's like you think of it as like, what are you so worried about? Like, who cares what other people think or something like that? And I'm like, well, we do as a species. We deeply care. And can you overdo it? Yeah, of course you can. You can put too much stock in what other people think. But here's the reality, right? let's say that I'm part of a hunter-gatherer tribe. Okay, and
I can see it.
And we're going, clearly, and we're going around the savannah, this tribe, and there's something about me that I, let's say, correctly decide. It's like, this is true about me, I can't change it, and if anybody sees this, I'm getting kicked out of the group. Well, here's the thing, it's not like I just get kicked out of the group, and it's like, oh, it's a bummer, because I got bullied or something. It's like, that's a death sentence.
You will literally die.
Like 50 humans together, lions have no chance. One human alone, we're screwed. We have absolutely no chance against the elements. Not to mention that you lose all the cooperation, all the cooperative help that a tribe gives you in terms of collecting resources and division of labor, which that's kind of that's a great that's Alfred Adler's definition for civilization, is just division of labor. It's kind of interesting, So it is not some newfangled, 21st century concern about I don't want to feel ashamed, I don't want to feel rejected, and this makes me some kind of snowflake. That's like an existentially frightening experience for members of our species. So it's like, it is a big deal.
Yeah, it's biological, which means you don't have to feel bad about it. You can't help it. You're not responsible for that biology.
Yeah,
just accept it and then use it. What is it saying about what you value or what you need or want in life or what you want out of relationships?
No, and that's with a lot of things. We can overestimate and kind of catastrophize. And we think well, if I get rejected by this one person, then I am unlovable and nobody will ever accept me and things of that sort. So it's not to say, right, that you can't overdo it. but there is a level of just kind of self-validation that we could say, like, it is understandable that I am so afraid of rejection and getting, pushed out of a group.
Overall, it's like a good thing. It's saying, like, I want to be socially embedded. Like, I want to fit in. I want to belong, taking something like how'd you put it earlier? I lie, or I'm a liar, instead of just like, you lied. You made a mistake and you lied and you feel shame because you don't want to be a liar. You don't want to continue to lie.
Okay, now you're getting into what we can do about shame. And one of the things that I hear you kind of pulling out is that sometimes there's a tricky job that we have as human beings of understanding the nature between what we do and who we are. Yeah, and so like, can you unpack this a little bit further for folks of like, sometimes we mistake something that we have done and we attribute that to something immovable and bad about ourselves.
Yeah, it makes me think about when we were talking about, we were remembering when I was mean to you this one time. Just the one time. I've only been mean to you one time ever.
That is not true, by the way.
But instead of making the conclusion about myself, like the story that I tell myself is like, oh shit, I'm like a mean person. I do not deserve his friendship, or whatever else. But it's just, I acted mean. That's the reality. Yeah. I acted mean.
Yeah.
But then I catastrophized in some sort of way and decided to make it kind of about me instead of about what I've done to another person and how that's put distance between you and I.
Well, and that's, and so then can you talk to us a little, we're talking about shame as kind of an emotion that compels us to hide, that makes us want to hide. What does hiding look like when you're mean and then you feel this feeling of shame? And I mean I am talking about you, but like I'm also just talking
such a meanie.
Generally, I'm using that as the general you.
Well, like, I don't know. I can imagine that I might make excuses or blame you. Well, like, if you hadn't done X, Y, or Z, then I wouldn't have had to be mean.
Okay. So, it can start, like, defensiveness is a way to hide.
Which I'm just shirking all responsibility, like social responsibility here, relationship responsibility. Like, well, it's really your fault because you're too sensitive. I was just joking. I make it into a joke. I was just joking.
Yeah. That's a very interesting. It's a very like active strategy for hiding, right? Mm-hmm. Is to what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a sideshow, and I see this fault in myself, and I feel very ashamed, and I don't want anybody to see that. And so what I will do is I will create this sideshow over here in which we're not looking at my faults. We're looking at these other faults. And I'm going to bring those into focus. That's a clever way to hide.
Another clever way, be really, really nice. Just be really nice. That way,
you
have no reason to be mad at me. You have no reason. Yeah. I'm not a mean person. I'm showing you I'm not a mean person.
Yeah, that and like to overdo it, right? I mean, because of course there's like there's a proper reorientation of like, oh, I've been mean. Let me be kind. Yes. Let me like reorient and be kind.
I'm kind of like sickly sweet.
Yeah, you like overdo it, and it's like. I'm going to cover this yucky thing. I'm just going to dip it in very thick chocolate, and it's going to look delicious,
like sugar-coated or chocolate-covered cockroach.
Yeah.
Or scorpion, which I did get my daughter. Yeah.
Well, that's...
For another episode.
Yeah, clearly.
Unfair.
I don't know what that'll be about, but... So that's a way to hide. Obviously, you can also just you can shut down.
Oh, yeah.
And just, become mute. I'll never forget a client who engaged in self-harm, and what this did is, in a similar kind of way, it created a sideshow. Mm-hmm. By the way, not that they knew that they were doing this, but they engaged in self-harm, and then everything became about, oh my gosh, how can we keep you safe, and oh my gosh, we're so sad that this is how you feel about yourself, and whatever, and this thing that had happened didn't get attended to at all. Gaslighting would be a way to hide, of like, no, that's actually not what happened. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna kind of reframe events or reshape events, deny events, such that we can't see what it is about me that might be worthy of rejection.
Which is just like stirring stuff up for me, where I'm just like, that's so disrespectful. Like hearing somebody else say it and not just out of my mouth is like, that's so disrespectful. It like to the other person and to the relationship. Like you're kind of assuming that the other person sees it as some constitutional part of you, like that you are a meanie, like that's just who you are. You just are an asshole. Instead of that, they're not going to give you the benefit of the doubt, like, hey, they love me or they care about me and they're going to know it was just a mistake. But instead you hide.
Yeah.
You hide because you think it's all about you. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so that's okay. So this is like one category of of a mistaken where shame can get us into trouble is when we confuse
Yeah.
what we've done and who we are.
Right.
And those things, again, of course, they are related.
Yeah.
But they're not synonymous either, and so sometimes we can we can extrapolate from an action or a behavior and extrapolate that into identity, and so then we're in this yucky shame thing, and we hide in all these ways, some which are particularly unhelpful and disrespectful. Now there are other mistakes that we can make. One of the ones that comes to mind for me is that we can assume that something really is immutable and unchangeable about us, that it's not. Like we do actually have some say. So like, and there's an aspect of like performative shame, right? Where like an example of this would be, let's say that I am a bit of an asshole to somebody, okay, and then I say, I know I'm a terrible person.
Oof.
And there's something wrong with me where I am just like, I get so mean and I ruin everything that I touch, everything, I just mess everything up. Right. And it's this, and by the way, it's not that those feelings of shame, like they're there. It's not that I am performing in the sense of like performing out of absence of those feelings. I have those feelings but I'm putting them on display. And in essence, here's the genius of it. I'm not saying health, but the genius of it is it's saying, I'm just awful. I just am awful, and so you can't expect me to be anything other than awful, ever.
It's the white flag.
Yeah, it's just I surrender, I give up, and you also must give up on me. You can't expect reasonable behavior out of me. This is just who I am. I'm just a piece of garbage. And that's also a mistake. And by the way, I'm kind of giving the hyperbolic kind of very active way of expressing that, but there's also a kind of much more covert way of doing that where you throw a very quiet pity party for yourself in the background, and you mope around because you're just so awful.
Are you talking about me right now?
I don't know. Am I talking about you right now? Apparently I am.
I mean, historically, that is admittedly what I've done. Like, I'm just gonna like lash myself because I'm just like a terrible person.
And the thing is, right, is that okay, there are things about us that are immutable characteristics. Okay, and let's I'll connect this a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's say that you get in this kind of shamey place where you're like, I'm such an asshole. It may be that you are an exceptionally assertive person. Okay, and like. On a Big 5 personality inventory, maybe you would score quite low on agreeableness. Okay, but the thing is scoring low on agreeableness does not mean that you are an asshole. No. It means that you are not particularly agreeable, and you can carry that differently than running around insulting people, being brash, being unempathetic, being like whatever we could fill in the blank. But then it's like we think about like, well, I'm just not a very agreeable person, and we assume that is that me being an asshole is immovable, and it's not. There are skills that you can learn to come around your low agreeableness that are going to mitigate your being an asshole. And so there's no need to feel shame about who we are. There's no need to feel shame about not being a particularly agreeable person. That's like whatever.
It's useful. We need people like that.
In fact, science would say that you make more money.
It's true.
That's
what science says.
Statistically, your salary is going to be higher if you're low on agreeableness.
Because you're likely to ask for a promotion and have good relationships because you set good boundaries. Like
put your foot in the ground. You hold a line. You advocate for yourself and potentially also for other people.
Be a good parent.
So like
down the line.
There's no need to feel shame about that. You may need to feel guilt about being an asshole, and so that's a mistake that we can make where we're over here doing shame, which really it's like you can't even do anything about it, and actually it's not downgrade to guilt to like make you feel better. It's actually like you actually need to downgrade to guilt so that you get your butt in gear and start making some necessary changes in order to get along with other people on like a basic level. You don't have to be, ultra accommodating, but just to get along and be a kind person.
It's like instead of it being like shame period, it's like comma or semicolon. It's like that doesn't have to be it. Like you can use it in horizontally or vertically. Like what are you going to choose? You know? I like that. Do you want to I can give an example of like a relatable example, and then we can kind of break it down and see how it might flesh out.
Sure.
Okay, what if you are from the South, or maybe not from the South, but let's say you're from the South and you're a Christian and you're in a committed relationship and you really want to have some sex, or at least you're thinking about it a lot.
Okay, and when you say committed, you mean like, oh, you're not married yet?
You're not married yet.
Okay. And so this person with whom you're in a committed relationship, you want to have sex with them, but you have a value structure that says that that's out of bounds.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and, this is
relatable,
hypothetical, but really not very hypothetical. Like, this happens constantly. I mean, I don't know about you. We work a lot with young adults, and so we're seeing this all the time.
And I grew up Catholic, so yeah.
Yeah. No. Let's say, okay, so then somebody who they're in that situation, they feel shame, and what is the shame? What is it that they think is wrong with them? How would you articulate that?
There's something like it's like really bad. It's like morally, fundamentally, like I'm going to hell. That's how bad it is. If I do this, it's not just I'm out of the group. I'm out of like the entire group, like universal group, and I'm going to be separate from everybody for eternity. Like it's high stake.
Yeah.
At least that was what I thought. And then also like what your peers, like what's the term, backsliding?
Backsliding. Backsliding.
And then all that judgment. How many times I was asked if I had been saved, I couldn't even tell you. I'd be a millionaire.
Yeah. And so, and it's almost like I feel like a lot of young people who come out of particularly like kind of like purity culture, like very like fundamentalist backgrounds, there's this feeling of like there's something deviant about the fact that I would like to have the sex with this person who I am not married to. And so here's the thing about that. Okay, I want to leave room for people to have
it's okay to value
ideas about sexual morality. Okay, like there needs to be room for that. And by the way, I get very irritated with our profession sometimes that we do not afford people room to have values around those things. And honestly, it's like bordering on unethical sometimes how we push against that. So I'm not making a moral statement. I'm making a scientific statement here. The reality is that if you are a sexually mature human, there are, with very, very rare exceptions that would only serve to prove the rule, you are going to want to have sex.
Yep.
And that is like, it's as much a part of you being you as you needing to breathe in oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide. Like, it is part of just who you are. Now, again, how you carry that.
Yeah, and what you do with it.
What you do with that, I think that's where there are all these other things that can come into play in terms of value systems and how you understand yourself and how you understand yourself from a moral perspective, whatever. But here we're getting to this third mistake, and that is that we sometimes recognize something about us that actually is immutable. Like it's true, we cannot change it. But then we falsely decide that it is a disqualifying characteristic about us. Like,
sorry, I just got really sad because I'm thinking about all the people that like they genuinely, it's just they're bad.
Yeah. I mean, really, that you think that you are just deeply, deeply deviant and twisted and ugly and whatever, simply because you have sexual desire. By the way, just like quick side note on this, this is not to turn this into like a theological podcast, but like I think it's fascinating to remember that in the Bible, the first command that God gives to human beings is to have sex.
Yep.
Like immediately. That is the first thing. And so that's just
and premarital sex specifically is not even really laid out.
That's one
pun intended.
And there's like room for people to have opinions about that, right? And
which we can respect. We can totally respect that.
People have a right to say, I want to reserve sex for a committed marriage, like a marriage. I want to reserve it for that. They have a right to do that, and whatever. And so then, morality in part, it shapes some things that we understand about that also shapes emotions. Mm-hmm. That shapes guilt, and and certainly shapes shame. But there's this thing of like, okay, we need to distinguish between what I am and how I carry what I am. And this gets back to Adlerian ideas of psychology of possession and psychology of use. Look, you possess a sex drive.
Let's not pretend that you don't.
And here's a thought, okay, is that if it makes you worthy of rejection from all community, if you if your sex drive is active before you are married, nobody gets to participate in the human community. Like not a single person. Everybody, there's a kind of solidarity that we can experience there. Now, how you carry that sex drive, okay, then this is when we get down into like cultural and religious and societal values that, yeah, we can have like meaningful discussions about whether those things are reasonable or biblically correct from a Judeo-Christian perspective, whatever.
And that's a good point. You can use it to talk to your fellow Christians or in your youth group or whatever, and normalize it instead of like shaming the shame.
Yeah. To
connect,
to rebuke and fundamentally reject yourself, and that's what we do, and we hide, right? In essence, what we're saying is like, I will pre-reject myself so that the community doesn't. Yeah. If we do that for things that it's just like you literally can't get around it, those are the things that actually it would be so much better if rather than hiding those things, we were open about them. And I by the way, I'm not saying indulge. I'm saying be open with them, that allows us to connect. And I think we would surprise ourselves most of the time by how rarely we get rejected for things like that. Now, I'm not saying nobody's going to reject you for doing that either, because it's not just me who has silly ideas about what's worthy of rejection. It's other people too. They have weird ideas about what would make me worthy of rejection. And so that's, I'm not trying to create some Pollyanna idea where like, oh, nobody would ever reject you for anything. That's not true.
But it is I'm a pretty open book. Like when we're at like Adlerian events, like all and when I teach story, and like it's pretty rare that at least one person, if not many, is like, oh my gosh, like I've had that, not the exact same experience, but I've done that, and I'm like, okay, whew, good.
Yeah.
But I put it out there so that way other people can relate if they want to.
Yeah.
And if not, fine, I'll be the center of the group.
Yeah, so just to kind of summarize, you and I don't want, you'll correct me if I'm speaking out of turn here, but we are not of the opinion that there is nothing that people should be ashamed of. Shame is an appropriate emotion. It is an important part of our emotional lexicon. We need it. It alerts us to the fact that sometimes there are things that are about us, maybe not immutable things, but like there are things about us that are not gonna work in a community, and we need to like pay attention to that and go work on it. But then also sometimes we need to recognize that because of the existential stakes of rejection, we can overestimate, much in the same way that somebody who's suffered a trauma, maybe they were in combat or something and then they hear a car backfire and they're like, oh my gosh, like I'm back in it. It's a similar thing where like the stakes are so high that things that look, they have a whiff of the potential for rejection. And then we get all activated and all stirred up. And if we can just slow down and recognize some of these potential mistakes that we can make around shame, we can save ourselves a lot of trouble. We also can encourage other people, because if we're not hiding, then maybe they don't hide, and we can, build a sense of community there. And also point us back to the things that maybe we don't need to feel ashamed about, but maybe there's some guilt that's necessary, and we do need to like get to work rather than waving the white flag, as you said earlier.
And overall, just like it's kind of great news when you feel guilt or shame, or it can be partly good news. Like it means you want to connect, you want to deeply connect and be accepted. Okay, you want to get along with others. That's good news. You don't want to be a serial killer. Great to know.
Yeah, so when we lean into that allows us to see like, what is it that, okay, I have this emotion. Now what do I want to do with it? How do I want to carry this? How do I want to handle it? Other than just reflexively hiding, gaslighting, denying, sideshows, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Nailed it.
Well, thank you all so much for indulging our desire to have these little fun conversations. We hope that you find them fun. Thank you so much for some of you in particular are like so encouraging and always give us such kind feedback. For those of you who don't, you suck. You should be ashamed of yourselves. I'm kidding.
That's appropriate shame. You should feel really bad about it.
It's more that I'm expressing gratitude and thankfulness for the people who are like so kind and encouraging to give us some positive feedback. So,
and recommendations on what to do. We have like stuff that we can do in the next few weeks.
Yeah.
I'm excited. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will see you next time. Bye now.
Bye.